Red Bull and RB's decision to drop Daniel Ricciardo mid-season had nothing to do with him performing so badly that an immediate change was needed. RB team boss Laurent Mekies made it crystal clear last weekend that if the Australian had the car underneath him he needed, like in the Miami Sprint this year, his pure speed was still there to make the most of it. Instead, the maneuvering that has triggered Ricciardo's F1 exit and brought Liam Lawson back to a race cockpit is very much about Red Bull needing to get on the front foot with its 2026 driver plans. If we rewind a bit, we must remember that Ricciardo's comeback for RB last year was ultimately an audition for Red Bull. With Sergio Perez having some wobbles throughout the second half of 2023, Red Bull knew that if Ricciardo showed the same speed he did during that post-British GP test in the RB19 last year, then he would be a comfort blanket to slot in if its Mexican incumbent did not lift his game. But things did not get off to the best of starts when Ricciardo broke his wrist at Zandvoort, opening up the door for Lawson to impress during a 5-race stint for the squad. Then, despite Perez struggling massively at the start of 2024, Ricciardo's inconsistent form meant he came short of convincing Red Bull that he would be an automatic step-up if given a return to Milton Keynes. There was that very brief spell around the Hungarian and Belgian GP where Ricciardo appeared to be in the frame as Red Bull lost hope in Perez. But once the squad committed to sticking with what it knew, then that ultimately set in stone the events that have played out this week. Looming right at the back of the minds of Red Bull's senior management is what to do about its drivers for 2026, even though in theory both Max Verstappen and Perez have contracts. Neither can be 100% certain they will be there. Verstappen could walk to another team or out of F1 completely, while Perez needs to perform better to secure his place. These possibilities mean Red Bull cannot risk having any other top-line options on the table if it needs to pursue a plan B. The team has to be sure it has its bases covered on two fronts. First, there is keeping a close watch over top talent from other teams, which is why Red Bull team boss Christian Horner has been stirring the pot by saying that George Russell could be a target for him in the future. But what Red Bull especially needs to do is know who is best available from its current young driver pool. And the only way to be sure on that front is to get the comparisons rolling straight away. With Ricciardo not a long-term option, Red Bull could not really wait until the start of 2025 to slot Lawson in again and get a definitive verdict on how he stacks up against Yuki Tsunoda. Perez's ongoing inconsistent form means the jury is out on his seat for next year, let alone 2026. And if things don't improve by the end of the campaign, Red Bull needs to be sure about who would be the best alternative if needed. It is pretty clear Red Bull does not think Yuki Tsunoda is the right fit to join Verstappen, but throwing Lawson in without a decent run of races to show his potential would be taking a big risk. Plus, if Perez goes and Lawson is not up to it, then Red Bull could find itself on the hunt for two drivers. So while it would have been nice to allow Ricciardo a chance for a farewell tour to see out the season, time is not on Red Bull's side. That is why it needs to be sure about Lawson as quickly as possible to know where he fits in. Is he fast-tracked to the top team, or does he need more time to develop himself? Then there is also the debate about what to do with its other junior drivers. Issa Kadjar has done a good job in F2 and is banging on the door of F1. While Ayumu Iwasa has been putting in the podiums in Super Formula, as Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko explained in a video, there is a bigger picture at play here. He said Ricciardo was brought back with the chance for him to come to Red Bull Racing if he had shown the appropriate performance at Racing Bulls, but you have to see it in a larger context. We have a good number of young drivers. There's Hadjar, there's Lawson, there's also Iwasa, without ranking them anywhere. And we have to look to the future, and we also want to have comparisons. Where does Lawson stand in comparison to Yuki? Then, for the future, what does the driver pairing look like for our two teams? This then is the game at play. Red Bull's driver shuffle for the United States Grand Prix is not about lifting results now. It is all about what happens 18 months from now. Helmut Marko believes Daniel Ricciardo lost his killer instinct in the years away from Red Bull. As he explained the Australian's RB exit, On Thursday, it was confirmed Ricciardo has been replaced at Red Bull's RB team for the remainder of 2024 by reserve driver Liam Lawson, with the New Zealander joining Yuki Tsunoda from Austin's US Grand Prix onwards. The news all but marks the end of a 14-year stint in F1 for 35-year-old Ricciardo, who is now mulling over his future in racing. As a Red Bull junior, Ricciardo rose through the ranks to compete for the main team between 2014 and 2018, and he became one of F1's standout performers during that era, collecting 7 wins alongside Sebastian Vettel, and then a rapidly emerging Max Verstappen. Ricciardo was persuaded by Renault team boss Cyril Abiteboul to make the jump to the Instone-based team for 2019, but struggled to repeat his Red Bull successes in uncompetitive machinery. After 2 fruitless seasons, Ricciardo moved to McLaren, but despite taking an 8th win at the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, he endured 2 frustrating seasons trying to adapt to the team's machinery, before being cut loose 1 year before the end of his deal in 2022. Marco said he believes Ricciardo's career never recovered from leaving Red Bull in the first place, and says the Australian has lost his killer instinct along the way. I think the decision to leave Red Bull Racing was the turning point in his career. Then he didn't have a winning car at either Renault or McLaren. He did win at Monza, but those were special circumstances. I don't know what exactly happened, because if we knew, we would have helped him. But the speed and, above all, this late braking, and then he goes left or right. In these last few years he tried, but it was no longer there. The killer instinct was gone. He never had the killer instinct. He was a mediocre driver at best. His first year driving alongside Vettel clouded out the judgment of a lot of people. When Verstappen came to RBR and won his first race in Spain, he knew his time was done. He was relieved. He qualified in front of Verstappen. He was never that guy. He thought he was a number 1 driver, but he wasn't. He should have accepted that, but his ego didn't let him. Of course it was. He ran away from the Verstappen fight when he was supposed to be the attacking honey badger and admires cage fighters. Marco could have said more, so this is a neutral assessment. I heard him say before how Ricciardo didn't put the time in on technical, simulator, etc., and Daniel himself admitted it. He just floated on the skill he had acquired and his late braking party piece when the car worked. Marco had the authority in the past when Machitz was still alive. After that, he lost that authority, and nowadays every decision must go through a committee. That's also what ruined Ricciardo's farewell. The team told him he would be fired, but also that it would depend on the majority owner, possibly staging a protest and blocking his firing. That's why nobody could be sure until today. Committees are inefficient and always lead to stagnation. Red Bull as an F1 team won't exist anymore come year 2030.